Hello, I'm Ruth and welcome to this episode of Spectrum Farms Needleworks. Tonight I'm excited to tell you a little bit about one of the quilts that I'm working on. It is from the Kim Diehl and Joe Morton book, Simple Friendships. This is the book. The quilt I'm working on is actually this one right here on the cover. So I've got it marked and it's called Warm Regards. And this is what it looks like. You can see it. And I'm actually working on this bird right here. And I'm trying out a technique that I have not used before, and it's applique using lightweight interfacing. And here's another look at the whole quilt. You can see it's absolutely beautiful. It used Civil War reproduction type colored fabrics. I'm using some from my stash that are similar in color, and then I'm just picking from my stash. So for the bird that I'm working on, I am using Pellon SF101 Shape Flex. And let me see if I have, I'll just put it behind the book. And this is what it looks like. Pellon SF101 Shape Flex. Now I also have lightweight Shape Flex, but I'm not quite sure where I put it. So tonight, this is what we're using. Pellon SF101 Shape Flex. And I'm going to show it to you one more time. It's iron-on woven cotton interfacing. And what I'm doing is I've taken my plastic that I got at Joann's at the craft store. That it's the plastic that you use to cut out templates. And so here's my bird. And then what I'm doing is I take the interfacing. Oh, here we go. You might be able to see it on here. I take the interfacing and on the non-glued side. So the interfacing has, let me grab this small piece. So this side is smooth. This side is bumpy because that's where the adhesive is. So on the non-adhesive side, I'm drawing out my bird. I take my template, I trace around my bird, and then what I do is I take my piece of fabric, and what you want to do is line up the right side of your fabric with the bumpy side that has the adhesive, because you're sewing inside out. So you're going to put that on your fabric. Let me kind of turn it, because you're going to need, okay. So this is the right side of the fabric, and what's facing it, what's touching it, is the bumpy side, okay? And because this fabric is dark, I used my heat erasable pen right on the smooth side of the interfacing. And that's the side I'm going to stitch on. I'm going to stitch right on my line, okay, to get my shape. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, so now we have our sewn shape. So you can see I stitched right around the bird, right on the line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out using my seam allowance, creating my seam allowance. So I'll show you right here. I'm not going to stitch around the whole thing, but so I'm going to cut enough to have a seam allowance. And then what I'm going to do within that seam allowance is I'm going to clip my curves. So I'm going to go almost to the line and make a little slit. Let me make a couple of those. Okay, so now you can see where I made just tiny little cuts in the fabric. Okay, and I'm going to do that all the way around my bird. Then once we have our bird completely clipped, I take my skewer, and I turn my bird right side out. So now my fabric, my right side of my fabric is on the outside. The bumpy side of my interfacing is on the outside. You can see where I pulled the two fabric pieces apart like this and held this aside so I could just make sure I'm only cutting on the interfacing so I could turn it right side out. Then I took my skewer, I worked my seams, I carefully worked, you know, my edges, flip it around, and I went through my tail to make sure it all looked the way I wanted to look. Okay, so do not iron this. Now we're going to take this to our quilt, and you can see here where I already have one. This one is already appliqued. I hand applique using goodness, what am I trying to think of? Invisible thread, and I'll show that to you in just a minute. So here's my bird, and I've already attached the wing. But now I'm going to show you, I'm going to turn the camera and show you how I'm going to lay this out. Okay, so here is the quilt that I'm working on. This is the bird that I attached. So now I'm going to flip this around to the side that I want it on. And then I'm going to take my bird and I'm going to line it up where I want it on my quilt block. So what you're seeing right here, this is part of a stem. So I'm going to take my bird, line it up where I want. And what's nice about that interfacing is it kind of grips the fabric that I have, my background fabric. And then I can either pin this or I can start stitching around it. You could stitch by machine for your applique method, or I stitch by hand. And I store my invisible thread in an old medicine bottle, cleaned out of course. This is what the thread looks like that I'm using. Gutermann is a nice brand. This one is Sulky Invisible Thread. And it looks like, it's really hard to see, it looks like really fine, thin fishing line, if you can see that. It's very thin. And when I put it on my fabric, it blends in nicely. Okay? So that is how I am attaching my applique for my quilt. That is the Warm Regards by Kim Diehl and Joe Morton. So if you try out this method, let me know how you like it. Once you have all of your applique pieces in place and you're happy with how it looks, that's when I would iron it. So this particular block, the bird, has been only attached by hand, and I have not ironed this yet. I'm going to wait until I have my complete block. This is my center block that I'm working on. So once I have my complete block done, then I'm going to take it to the iron. Okay, so I've also done the same thing with this bird wing. So there's my completed bird wing. And I have also started on the leaves with the same method. So this is a leaf. You can see where I've turned it right side out. The bumpy side is here. Here's my slit that helped me to turn this right side out. And now I can take my petal, my leaf, and place it and then start stitching. I hope you enjoyed learning about this applique method using interfacing. Again, the book is Simple Friendships by Kim Diehl and Joe Morton. And the specific quilt that I'm making out of this book is called Warm Regards. To make sure that you don't miss out on any of the content, especially for the next part of this quilt block that I'll be putting together, please click the subscribe button, check that like, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.